This message comes from NPR sponsor Discover. With Discover Cashback Debit, everyone can earn cash back on everyday debit card purchases with no fees, period. Transaction eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC.
Hi there. Before we get into it, we are working on some special episodes of NPR's It's Been a Minute, and I want to have you on the show. That is, if you're a member of Gen Z. I'm looking for people ages 18 to 24 to join me for a roundtable. We're going to talk about the gender divide and how it shows up in dating, your economic outlook, your hopes for the future, and the politics of your peers. If you're interested in coming on the show, email ibam@npr.org. That's IBAM@npr.org. Cannot wait to hear from you. Okay, on to the show. Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luse, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. Heads up to listeners, this episode includes mentions of sex and sex work, and also contains some vulgar language. Award season is finally over, and even though Oppenheimer took home the top prize for Best Picture at the Oscars, Barbie still seemed to be a fan favorite. I'm just kidding. Anywhere else I'd be taken. To commemorate the official close of the Barbie movie press run, we revisit our conversation from last year about the spectacular femininity of Barbie girls. Because it's not just the movie. This brand of hyper-feminine fun has been on the rise for the past few years, especially among young femmes who call themselves bimbos.
Hi, welcome to Bimbo TikTok. I'm so glad you could finally make it.
TikTokers like Chrissy Chopeka, who you just heard, and Nikita Redcar are exploring what it means to be a bimbo through their online personas. But they aren't just embracing the no-thoughts pretty girl stereotype. They're adding an extra layer to what being a bimbo means. The new bimbo is often a socially aware, anti-capitalist leftist.
Girlies, we all want to eat the rich, but what if I told you we already had them on the menu?
Both Barbie and real-life bimbos are hyper-feminine, and they get criticized for being bad role models. But what's actually so bad about carefree, maximalist femininity? We've got bimbos, Barbies, and the benefits of being over the top.
This message is brought to you by Apple Pay. Who wants to fuss with inserting a card into a reader, or worse, into a skimmer, where your card information can be stolen? Instead, pay the Apple way. Apple Pay is easy, secure, and built into iPhone. All you have to do is set it up. Just add a card in the Wallet app and you're good to go. This message comes from NPR sponsor Discover. Debit card users, Discover has something especially for you. With Discover Cashback Debit, everyone can start earning cash back on everyday debit card purchases. That's right, cash back on debit purchases, because cash back isn't just for credit cards. Plus, there are no fees, period. Finally, the game-changing checking account you deserve. Check out transaction eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC. This message comes from NPR sponsor Carvana. Shop for your next car the convenient way, 100% online with Carvana. Getting pre-qualified takes less than 2 minutes. Then see your real terms as you shop. Visit Carvana to finance your dream car the convenient way.
From your car radio to your smart speaker, NPR meets you where you are in a lot of different ways. Now we're in your pocket. Download the NPR app today.
Before we get to what the bimbo means now, we have to understand where she came from. And surprisingly, the word bimbo originally referred to men.
Apparently it came from the Italian word bambino, which means baby, and it was used as a kind of pejorative for men.
That's Hannah McCann, a lecturer at the University of Melbourne who specializes in critical femininity studies. She said that the heyday of the male bimbo came to a close in the 1920s, when the phrase flipped genders in songs like My Little Bimbo Down on the Bamboo Aisle.
But don't tell my wife, for I've got a bimbo down on the bamboo aisle.
We start to see this just intensifying use of the word bimbo to describe women, and particularly curvy, sexually promiscuous, airhead, stereotyped women, often blonde.
And it stayed that way for almost 100 years, till we got to the 2020s. And now the bimbo is being remade again, mostly thanks to TikTok.
You'll see on Bimbo Talk on TikTok that the people that are part of that are saying, yeah, I'm stupid. I've got nothing in my head. I'm a slut. And unlike the original stereotype that's really associated with cisgender, white, blonde women, what you see on Bimbo Talk are people who are queer, all different kind of races and ethnicities.
Anyone can be a bimbo. The girlies, gays, theys, our trans icons, the bicons, and everyone in between.
People who are identifying really explicitly as left-wing and Marxist often.
A bimbo isn't dumb. I mean, she kind of is, but she isn't that dumb. She's actually a radical leftist who's pro-sex work, pro-Black Lives Matter, pro-LGBTQ, pro-choice.
For young people of all genders who identify as bimbos, being a bimbo recently also means being extremely political and leftist. What is smart, or could be smart, about having a quote-unquote no thoughts, head empty approach to social critique? Like, how does that work?
It's about not having to engage with people who are demanding that you prove yourself, demanding that you can intellectually keep up with them or compete with them.
Bimbofication is an ego death. When you say goodbye to your ego, you don't have to defend yourself. You just are. Let people underestimate you.
And that is explicitly why it's so jarring to patriarchal frameworks that insist you prove yourself and keep up in a way that is perfect and up to certain standards, and that you speak in a certain way, that you look a certain way, you know, that idea.
In order to be heard and to have your ideas be valid.
Yeah.
One of the things we've been thinking about in preparing to talk to you is like how a bimbo feminism is like a part of a longer chain of different feminism styles or aesthetics that have come out in the past few decades, like girl power, which I survived, and girl bossery, which I also barely survived. But I wonder, what's new about bimbo feminism? Like, what needs does it address, and why is it popular now?
It's really good that you brought up girl boss feminism, because bimbo aesthetics and bimbo articulations are explicitly also a reaction to girl boss feminism, because
say more about that.
Because being able to say I've got nothing in my head and I'm not going to prove myself within this particular patriarchal structure is such a rejection of girl boss feminism, which is about leaning in and trying to keep up with the boys and dressing a certain way, power dressing, wearing the pantsuits and so on, being in line with capitalism and getting to the top of it and being an entrepreneur and all those things, whereas bimbos are embracing that aesthetic that is associated with kind of working class or lower class and often like white trash stereotype.
Also, aesthetics commonly associated with sex workers, having, you know, hair extensions, tight clothing, super tall platform heels. The more I think about what it means to be a bimbo or what a bimbo looks like is where race plays into that as well. Because the thing I just keep thinking about over and over again is I'm like, well, where would I fit in? And I identify with a part of the bimbo aesthetic that you're talking about. Like, I'm here to have a good time and preserve my energy for the things that actually need me, that need my attention, and that I actually care about. I'm not here to prove myself to people who already don't see my value. But I don't know if I'd feel comfortable calling myself a bimbo because of the assumptions that are already out there about Black women's intelligence. Where does the bimbo aesthetic exist outside of whiteness?
I think that's such an important question. Before this rise of bimbo talk, which is trying to articulate a bimbo that isn't necessarily white or cisgender or a woman, every stereotypical representation that we have of the bimbo is white and blonde. And even if we look at something like the Barbie movie, I mean, there's obviously Barbies of all different races in the film, but the main Barbie's white. And, you know, the most kind of famous bimbo talk stars are also white. So even though, you know, there is this strong sense of wanting to reject that and also to support movements like Black Lives Matter, I think it's so fair enough if you feel like this doesn't speak to you.
I have seen self-professed bimbos of different racial backgrounds. It'll be interesting to see how these conversations continue to develop. But going back to a very famous bimbo that you mentioned earlier, our OG bimbo, Miss Barbie, is coming back. In the same way that bimbos could be simultaneously read as feminist and anti-feminist, Barbie has been read as both of those too. And also because Barbie's movie is coming out, I am seeing people fight every day online about what she represents. What makes Barbie such a fraught icon of femininity?
She's a fraught icon because even though in recent decades Barbie has diversified in terms of body types and presentations and abilities and ethnicities, she, for the most part, has been blonde, she's white, she's skinny, she's kind of normatively beautiful and adhering to kind of particular beauty standards. And so she's fraught because she's seen to represent a model to which little girls should aspire, which is narrow. But on the other hand, you know, there is this idea that Barbie has been every occupation and she can do anything. And so there's this,
right.
There's a kind of like feminist critique of Barbie as representing patriarchal femininity. And then there's a feminist defense of Barbie as representing a girl boss feminism. I hate both of those, really. I think that if we want to look at what Barbie means, she's not just this floating signifier that tells us how to look. It's about how people play with Barbie. And there's multiple Barbies that people have and Kens, and they do all kinds of things with them. I mean, my Barbies, I had 2 Barbies and a Ken. Ken was gay and the Barbies were a butch and a femme Barbie. And I cut one of the hair off and that was it. Like, they were all queer, and you can project onto Barbie. That to me is more interesting than just saying that she's a problematic icon or she's some fantastic icon.
Barbie is, I mean, quite literally plastic.
And it's so interesting to me that there's this kind of, you know, fear of like everyone's going to try and like look as unrealistic as Barbie. And then when you get women who literally try and have plastic surgery to look like Barbie, all of the commentary is like this crazy, distorted figure person who doesn't look like a human being anymore. And you're like, doesn't that tell us something interesting about like the hyper-femininity of Barbie is actually, in her unnaturalness, points out something about the unnaturalness of gender generally? Like, it actually seems kind of subversive and queer to me rather than natural and unremarked upon.
That is kind of interesting because it's like the idea that like all beauty is profane unless it's natural. I mean, I used to wear a strip of false eyelashes, sometimes double, on each eye every time I went to a bar or club when I was in college. There was something really fun about having all of the effort that it took to look a certain way sitting right there on my face. But if the idea is that some people are so beautiful that they don't have to draw their faces on, I could see how that would be a little bit more insidious. Like, if you're born with it, it's better. Like,
yeah. One of the things I've kind of theorized about previously is whether there is such a thing as toxic femininity. Like, we talk about toxic masculinity. Is there a toxic femininity? And one of the kind of areas I think that promotes kind of toxic ideas about femininity is this cult of natural beauty that exists. There is this kind of bioessentialism behind it that is as if there is some good beauty and then bad beauty. And the bad beauty, of course, is associated with sex workers, with like lower class, working class women. It's associated with a bimbo. That's what's rejected. And, you know, I think so much of our attention when feminists critique beauty practices, they're actually focusing on the hyper-feminine, and they're focusing less on this more insidious kind of cult of natural beauty.
Speaking of the idea of hyper-femininity, going back to Barbie, Barbie is not just feminine. She's hyper-feminine, spectacularly feminine, as you say. What does that mean, spectacular femininity?
Yeah, there's this really fantastic concept coming out of critical femininity studies called spectacular femininity, which is re-looking at characters who've been dismissed before. So, for example, Maya Padan's done this work on the Spice Girls and like how their aesthetic is actually so spectacular that it connects with this kind of reading of them as drag. And I think that that's actually really interesting when we think about pop stars, because so many drag queens actually do reference pop stars. It's an interesting kind of interaction between like what is drag and who is in drag and what do we count as kind of subversive. It's a much more dynamic way of understanding what's going on in that presentation, rather than just saying, oh no, they're dupes of the patriarchy too, which is unfortunately so how some of the girl power stuff got interpreted.
Well, it's interesting because what it sounds like it does too is it really takes their gender performance and it actually considers it a performance.
Yes.
Like a Britney Spears or a Cher or a Diana Ross or a Madonna. There's a performance element in everything that they're doing. You don't come out the womb just Ginger Spice. There's construction, there's labor, there's work involved in becoming a Spice Girl or becoming the, you know, like I said, the Madonna or the Diana Ross or the Janet Jackson that we see on stage.
Exactly. There was a really interesting show that I analysed a few years ago out of the UK called Snog, Marry, Avoid. And they would take these women off the street who, according to the show, were wearing too much makeup, and they were just like disgustingly over the top women. And not just women, but it's like people who engaged in subcultures who were like goths and other kind of over the top styles. So they would take these people, put them through this make under process where they would like take off all their makeup and then like reapply makeup, but just like natural, nice makeup, and then dress them in conservative clothes.
Make under.
What are you going to do to me, Pod?
I'm going to turn you into a natural beauty.
Okay.
And the whole point of this show was like giving them a make under and like, and then they'd have all these people judge them and be like, would you snog, marry, or avoid this person? Like when they had makeup.
I would avoid that girl. She's got too much makeup on. I can't even see her features. I can't even see the colour of her eyes either.
And then afterwards it would be like everyone wanted to marry them rather than avoid them because, you know, they looked so much more acceptable. And I just thought this is so interesting that so much feminist analysis is focused on makeover shows as like super problematic, like reinforcing patriarchal standards. But when you transpose that onto a make under show, you actually see how those spectacular femininities are quite uncomfortable and like quite unnatural and disruptive for people. And it's actually, there's some midpoint there of something that passes as natural and conservative, and that is what is acceptable. And that's the kind of line that's trying to be enforced there.
That's funny because it also feels like you said the title, the name of the show is Snog, Marry, Avoid. It's funny because the tell is kind of in the construct of the show where it's based around marriage as the ultimate goal. It's like you could be just enjoying yourself wearing 6 pounds of makeup on your face every day. But then it's like, well, but do you want to get married? Because if you want to get married, you're going to need to wash your face and put on only 2 coats of mascara.
And that's like what I think bimbo aesthetics are about too. It's like, no, it's actually so exaggerated and over the top that if you were put on Snog, Marry, Avoid, it would be, people would be saying they'd avoid you. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. Or even when you think about like Barbie, one of the things that I have noticed in all of the Barbie promotion that has been put out there is that spectacularly feminine aesthetics of the film, the pink dream houses and the like super pink campy outfits are not necessarily appealing to men. Like, that's not who the film is even being marketed to. It's meant to appeal to people who enjoy the performance and the theatricality and the sense of fun within those spectacularly feminine aesthetics. We talked earlier in our conversation about the different feminist aesthetics. We know what the girl boss has wrought. Living in the girl boss matrix has made me personally tired. What potential do you see coming out of bimbos and bimbo feminism? What kind of world, aesthetic, or era might they create?
My biggest hope for bimbo feminism is that it will paradoxically mean taking femininity seriously. So even though part of bimboism is embracing being unserious, I think my hope is that it means when we look critically at texts like Barbie, we take it more seriously as something disruptive, as something that has queer potential, that we actually start thinking about masculinities in terms of femininity as well. So we look at how something that Rhea Ashley Hoskin has theorized as well is how kind of actually everything about toxic masculinity is really just a rejection of femininity. So we start kind of actually taking that more seriously. And we think about how fun femininity can be, how joyous and opening up the expressive possibilities for everyone without denigrating it or assuming that it's for a male gaze.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for coming on the show and talking with me about this today. I learned a lot.
Thank you for having me. I just love talking about bimbos.
Thanks again to lecturer Hannah McCann from the University of Melbourne. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Liam McBain,
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Jessica Placzek.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luse. Talk soon.
The economy can sometimes feel like a big, scary wilderness filled with jargon and unreadable charts.
The Planet Money Podcast is here to help.
We love spreadsheets.
Yeah, let us be your guide to the global economy.
We brought snacks.
Is that trail mix?
It's actually Gorp.
That's Planet Money from NPR.
Know that fizzy feeling you get when you read something really good, watch the movie everyone's been talking about, or catch the show the internet can't get over? At the Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast, we chase that feeling 5 times a week. We talk about the buzziest movies, TV, music, books, and more. From lowbrow to highbrow to in between. Catch the Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast from NPR.
The news can feel incredibly overwhelming. For a breath of much-needed fresh air, head to npr.org's culture section. From the buzzy movies, Tiny Desk, and artists that everyone seems to know about, type in npr.org for the latest and greatest in the pop culture universe.